So for Papua Nui, when we looked at the initial area, for Papua Nui then, the initial area for study was quite big. This is really as a result of the way the centre itself is geographically laid out. It's a long and thin centre. It includes Northern Mall and goes right through the commercial area along Papua Nui Road. So taking, again, the criteria, looking at accessibility first gave us quite a large study area to look at initially, which went either side of the railway line. There were some constraints in the area. There's an area of Business 5 zone industrial land, which for reasons of reverse sensibility, we decided to avoid looking at that area in particular, close to that industrial land. That's to the northwest of Northlands Mall. Just indicate on the map here for you. It's this area here. Okay. So, for example, we decided that we shouldn't look at this particular area here, for example.
Thingy area. The consultation RMD removed on this, the red bit. Why was that removed? Because of it's not related to the reasons you just gave with the industrial.
Which particular?
So the bit to the left of the drain. Oh, is that? Oh, the railway track. So. Yeah, so you've got a residential, suburban, dense and overlay, and then you've got. So why was that removed?
Okay, so overall for Papua Nui, the initial study area was quite big.
Right.
Again, the primary driver here is supply, and what would be considered maybe considered a more appropriate area is confining again to those blocks which are closest to the commercial centre itself. The railway line is, if you like, a barrier to accessibility. So on balance, compared to the other areas, were considered more appropriate, more accessible to the centre.
How is it a barrier?
It reduces the permeability or the options for reaching the centre from the west of the railway line. There's another issue in that area also, there's a special amenity area, and we considered it may be appropriate to avoid the special amenity area as well.
Also, in the feedback, we had quite a number of responses from people.
Yep.
Yeah, that area, quite rightly pointed out, has quite strong memorial ties to the RSA and to World War I, and there's quite a good deal of I would say concerns about that area as well, in terms of potential change to the look and feel of that area and its memorial atmosphere.
That would not go as far though as that Kemp Lane Marblewood Drive part of the area that was removed. This area up in here, no. Right? So the reason I'm asking is, again, I take your point about it's got to be near Northlands, it's got to be near bus routes and so forth. However, without addressing the issues around transport, and we all know what it's like down Main North Road and coming in from the north and going out at the end of the day, my concern is that we are adding to potential congestion in this area by shifting it onto those roads that are a huge problem at the moment, when we could have actually spread it somewhat by including that other main access in down Harewood Road. I take your point about the memorial, but it doesn't stretch into that other area there that's north of it. I just don't understand why you'd want to be adding to congestion and problems in an area when you do have another main arterial route that is actually able to assist in feeding traffic from that density into. Okay. I mean, that's just my...
Look, that's a good comment. We can do some further traffic modelling on that, just to see
really
that
to know what that showed actually.
That's right, and we'll bring that back to you when we bring you back the revisions on this chapter. Anything more to say on this one?
A dumb question, but can you explain to me again the residential suburban density overlay, what that means?
It is, everybody hear me? Yep. Yeah. I'll speak up a bit. we have an existing living two zone in the plan at the moment, which is allows a slightly higher density of residential building than the living one zone. When we started the review process, it was a zone that troubled us a little bit. We had a choice of either completely upzoning it into residential medium density or downzoning it into, or putting it down back into living one type density. In the end, we thought because of the property right implications around that, it would, and while we want to simplify the plan and reduce the number of zones, it would just be easier showing those areas, those living two areas as density overlays. Just an area. The rules are essentially exactly the same between the zones, except for allotment sizes and some other tweaks. So in the end, to simplify the plan, we found it easier just to put an overlay over these areas and refer back to the rules that allow a slightly higher density. In other words, it's a living two zone in another name.
It's just a planning mechanism that we use. Sometimes the maps get very complex to read, so it's just simply another way of indicating a specific area that rules relate to.
And as I said, an option was to remove the zone completely, but some quite significant problems.
And you couldn't just... I'm confused, sorry.
Well, one of our drivers is to reduce the number of zones that we have. If we just could have called it suburban residential two.
One of the drivers in the district plan review, and indeed coming through MFE and through SERA, is to reduce the complexities of plans. Currently across the two plans we have 109 zones, which is ridiculous, and about 40 or 50 of those relate to residential areas. It means you have different rules for each of those zones. There is no need for that number of zones.
We generally understand L1,
Right,
L3.
right.
And what I find confusing is you've taken something, I believe, that is simple and made it more complicated.
Well, can I just say that people who have worked with the operative plan may well understand those zones because they've worked with it for so long. Those zones weren't there before that operative plan. What we're also moving towards is a name for zones that actually means something. Suburban residential means suburban residential, and we all have a picture in my mind that means a house, one house on a site. Medium density is not suburban residential. That indicates that you've got further density in there, so maybe some apartments, 2, 3, 4 stories, depending on whatever the heights are. So we are generally, as a feature of this plan, moving towards, instead of zones with numbers on them, with an actual name that means something to people, and everybody will get used to them just as they've got used to the ones in the operative plan. But it does.
Are aware there's a legend?
Oh yes, yes, it's on the maps. It's on the maps that you were given. There's a whole legend showing you what the zones are.
No, I understand that, but the explanation you've given about
Right.
why it's come about, the fact that it used to be this and you may know it, it gives it a context.
Those are, yes, those kinds of things have been said at the very introduction of all of the public meetings that we've had. Next map. Well, no, in the public meetings that we've had tables that show the old zones and what they equate to in the new zones. That's correct.
I do. Just in terms of Meadow Street, Apollo, you say the rationale for reducing the medium density is away from the key activity centre. But if you looked at the development that's happened on Cranford Street, where that's now become, another business, commercial, quite extensive area for bars, restaurants, retail, it seems hard to understand why you'd reduce the density in those areas, given, the neighbouring development. So why did you take those ones out?
Cranford Street is not a key activity centre. It is another centre, and I take your point. It has close ties with the area around Meadow Street and Apollo Street. I'll take you back up to the regional policy statement objectives, and the regional policy objectives talk about supporting the key activity centres, and in this case it's Northlands, and the associated commercial activity around there. So the driver then is to look at intensification and support of that centre and not Cranford Street.
But even going across to Northlands, those areas are a lot closer to Northlands than, say, Bellevue, Blair, Amora Lane, Stroud Lane. So, and probably have better access. So why would you remove those?
Northlands is obviously the focus for the centre, but the centre itself is Papanui, which includes the commercial area which is to the south of Northlands Mall.
So, what, like, I don't know how the local councils feel, but it just seems ludicrous to me that you'd remove medium density away from where you've got a lot of increased commercial activity, particularly restaurants, bars,
I was
etc.
wondering if it's because I think we're trying to take the traffic off Cranford and Papanui is intended to be a public transport system. Would that be correct? So you're intensifying around the public transport
That's correct.
route,
That's one of the
possibly?
criteria, is access to public transport. I gave that one away.
Okay, so Merivale, again, stage one of the assessment criteria identified a large area around the core commercial activity and some logical boundaries given the number of other non-residential, non-commercial uses in the area, schools, hospitals, etc. Gave us quite a wide starting point again, and when we looked in detail at this area, we looked, one of the main factors to come up was the amount of medium density development that had already occurred in the existing Living 2 zones. A number of sites had already achieved quite high densities there, up to 30 households per hectare, and there was relatively recent turnover of housing stock in the area, i.e. recent development. Generally, zoning where you've had recent development will be less effective because the investment into the housing stock is relatively recent, and you're less likely to achieve any medium density in the short term. So taking this into account, plus elements of supply again, we determined that it may be appropriate to reduce the area to the west of Papanui Road and retain the area to the east of Papanui Road as a potential area that may be suitable for residential medium density. Yes, and that's the yellow area to the east of Papanui Road.
That's what I was going to ask about. You've got a couple of very big retirement villages and homes here. So there are a lot of elderly as well. I mean, is that something that you've taken into consideration, what the current demographic makeup of the area is? I'm thinking of safety as far as increased traffic. Already parking is a huge issue in the area as well because of the increased business in the mall and around surrounding areas. I mean, I'm just interested in why, because those homes and villages are pretty much around the area that you're intensifying to the edge of with Browns Road, McDougall Ave across the road, there's a retirement village there as well. So we've got intensification in the exact areas that these elderly are living, and yet on the other side of Papanui Road, where as far as I'm aware there isn't anything like that, you're removing that.
There's a hospice in there, and
Yeah.
parking's a nightmare. I think it's
Well, no, Nurse Maud was there, but they've moved to Wairaraki Road now. But I mean, there's still the main hospital. It's the other side, Mansfield Ave.
But if I look at the other side of the road, I know these streets pretty well. They have very, really tiny little streets, hard access. The mall's staff park all round there.
You mean on the side that it's been removed?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly the same on the other side with the addition of the elderly and the hospice and the homes.
The additionally of the elderly in the hospice and the homes is not going to make an effect to the number of homes that we would want to provide in medium density areas. I mean, those facilities do create opportunities for aged or infirm people, yes. No, we don't take into consideration more elderly people on the footpaths in respect to that matter with regards to safety, but certainly demographics of the area, we do. I'm unsure of what you were saying.
If I misheard you, it's not that it provides opportunities for the aged and that it's increased number of people,
That's
increased social issues as far as, groups living together, cars, shift working, parties. I mean, wherever you've got more people living, you get a more diverse sort of range of people living. And then you potentially get an increase in those issues that come about from increased density and a diverse, population.
Well,
So,
yes,
yeah.
yeah, that would be true. And so it opens up opportunities for various people who want that type of activity, who want to be able to have access to shopping, to bars, to restaurants, to be able to walk to these places.
Yes, but I'm talking about the elderly, Brigitte, people
Yes.
who are in retirement homes,
Yes.
in hospices.
Yes.
I agree that they probably would quite like to use the mall for the supermarket or what have
Right.
you. I doubt very much that they're kicking their heels up at Aikman's on a Thursday night. And with the increased number of
I
people...
would argue the whole point about that though, because I live in high density, really high density, and the noise in the area I live is less than when I lived in a suburban area. We got lawnmowers going, dogs barking, kids playing. It is quieter in high density in my view.
Is your concern, sorry, reverse sensitivity from higher density
Yes.
on those
Yes.
rest homes or
Yes,
what have you?
and what increased density does to suburbs where, I guess, quietness or, the quiet road traffic, the safeties that go with that, parking, can have a negative effect on people who are living in, retirement. And my mother is not in a retirement village. It's nothing to do with her. This is yeah.
We did receive quite a bit of feedback from retirement village owners and operators.
Positive?
Positive in the sense that they've asked, that they agree that retirement villages should be restricted discretion to categories in their zones. And we can touch on that a little later on. But part of their feedback was that they needed a relaxation in terms of build in a high density themselves. So in terms of the look and feel of the place, high density, from what I took from these submissions, from the comments, would be the same as what we're looking to deliver.
So the elderly who stay in their own homes, which is something that we all try and encourage and, as long as we can. I'm thinking of those as well. I mean, you're talking about it from an operator's, a business perspective, but I'm talking about it from residents' perspective.
I'd just like to add something you might find interesting. We found interesting in our community consultation sessions, the biggest support we got was from elderly for intensification because it allows them to stay in their own suburbs but move to smaller units. They don't necessarily want to remain in a big section with a single house, and they actually seen it as a positive for keeping elderly where they already are.
Okay, all right, thank you for that.
The other point to make is the district plan is a blunt tool in terms of intensification. It is only one part of the intensification story. When you come to looking at these areas, and this is something the council undoubtedly would need to turn their mind to as these areas develop, is the fact that when you've got more localised planning is more often needed in particular areas, particularly those, such as you say, that may have challenging issues such as parking, small narrow roads, although they are beneficial because they slow traffic, so there are some benefits to those intensification with slower roads. And then you get maybe on the other side of town, you've got very wide roads, so they can create just as many issues because there's faster traffic movements. So every intensification area does need a finer grained level of planning, you know, to realise its benefits.
Yeah, and I think you also touched on the dichotomy that there always is when neighbourhoods are changing from lower density one house on a section through to medium or higher density. I mean, that's the same discussion that's going on all around New Zealand, and particularly in Auckland at the moment. But the issues are there that we just do not have the land to continue with normal or what we knew as ordinary suburban development back in the 50s right across the plains. That's why we're trying to promote certain areas that meet certain criteria for more density living. And then that provides a choice of housing type as well. That's right. It does bring other issues that also need, but they're not necessarily always... those rules aren't necessarily brought in through the district plan. They might require other types of support.
You talked earlier about logical boundaries, and there are two things on this map that I'm seeing that don't necessarily fit with that. At the junction of Webb Street and Papanui Road, there are just two little sections which are noted as RMD when the rest of it has all been taken out. So just two sections there. And then the other question I've got is, presumably the grey area at the top of that block is commercial. So how come the original consultation medium density area included land that looks as though it wasn't zoned residential in the first place? Yeah, so at the opposite, at the end of Webb Street, on the opposite side of the road, two sections there in yellow. On Papanui Road, yeah, just at the end of, just opposite that Webb Street junction there.
You know the answer to that, you guys? We'll look at that a little more. I think we're trying to determine what's actually on those two sites.
Would it be that there's something on those sites that already meets the criteria for medium density?
They may already be zoned.
Right,
Maybe
okay.
well up3 already. Yeah.
Right. And then at the top of that block, where you've got the consultation area that looks as though it originally went outside of the residential area, how would that be? So you've got the area removed shading over a grey rather than a yellow area?
That area there. I think we pointed it out before, just think it's a mistake.
I believe that's where there was an issue about the zoning, the underlying zoning being a commercial activity or a residential activity, and I think it's basically a correction of a mistake.
No. Permanent, that's right. But look, we'll make sure we come back and we tell you specifically when we bring the revision back. Next map. So overall, you're happy with that map apart from that?
Yeah, no, I'm not happy with the map. Support the area being kept in, not removed, and I do support the submissions that have said amenity, lower height and two car park controls. So how can that happen?
So sorry, just to clarify, you support all of the hatched area to go back in as medium residential?
This area here, absolutely. It's right next to the key activity centre. It doesn't seem right that you remove it. I can't understand the logic. The stuff on the other side of the road is actually further away from the key activity centre. This is the stuff on the other that you're removing that actually makes more sense. So I'd rather see this area left in, but I do agree that there are traffic issues. So I think you do need some site-specific controls around car parking and the height and amenity as per on page. I can't really refer to it. It's in the public comments on the feedback that people support this, but they do have concerns about traffic, which I share.
No, don't get into that yet. So we need some guidance about the map first. was quite a lot. Scott?
It was about commensurate with every area that wasn't Rickerton. It was about average for all the other areas.
And so the overall
Feedback in general is, with consultation, we tend to hear from the less than happy people most of the time. I think it's fair to say that the general tone of all the feedback would have been about 80 to 90%, not enamoured of the idea of.
So in the
It doesn't come to mind, but I'll need to recheck that. I don't think that there was.
Scott, perhaps you could guide the councillors to that area as part of your section 32, I think, where you have the submissions broken down into each of the centres. And then you could have a look at the comments yourselves. Just there.